panic attack times like 100 I was in it for a year when I finally discovered the Amanita. And I was on a hike and I was, seriously contemplating ending my life. Like I was ready to pull the trigger, the proverbial trigger. And I was, thinking about this as I was hiking around. And then I found this patch of mushrooms.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Eyes Wide Open. Our guest today is Christian Rasmussen. Christian is an advocate for plant medicine. He's an entrepreneur and the founder of Amantara, the leading source for Amanita Muscaria, Kava Kana, and Blue Lotus botanicals. He's also the host of the Amanita Effect podcast. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, Christian. How are you?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Doing really well. Happy to be here.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Before we were talking, or before we were recording, when we were just talking, you said you just got back from a little bit of a retreat. So how did that go?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, we were in Florida for a few weeks. We were supposed to do a handful of ceremonies, and we went originally for a conference, the Psychedelic conference, which is the largest cannabis psychedelic conference in the world, and the owner's a really good friend of mine, which was great. And then, yeah, we had some ceremonies set up, which unfortunately fell through, but fortunately we were forced into a week and a half vacation, which we all really needed. So we slept and hung out on the beach and ate good food, and I don't get enough sleep in my day-to-day life, so that was really nice. And then, yeah, ended it out with a retreat over the weekend, which was great, and which we're hoping to start doing a lot more of coming up.
Very cool. And we'll get into that. I wish I could be forced into a vacation. That would be something. I think we could all use it, right?
Absolutely,
yeah. So I've got to ask you how I start most of my interviews here is asking a very important question, which is when you were a little kid, what did you want to be when you were growing up? And how did that lead you to what you do today?
I wanted to be two things. I wanted to be a writer and a physicist. Although the physicist came later, maybe when I was a teenager. But yeah, there's a home video of me at like 5 or 6 years old on the bed writing a story. And my dad's asking me questions about the story, and I'm like, "This is going to make me $6 million." I was always like an entrepreneur as well, and I come from an entrepreneurial family. But yeah, I wanted to be a writer, and I think that, that plays into a lot of what we're kind of doing right now as a business. Like one of the reasons that we were in Florida was to do what we called Mushroom Church, and it was the first sermon, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, that we've done, and we're hoping to start doing these all over the world, and or at least all over the country coming up here. But so I wrote out this really long sermon that went over really well, and everybody ate Amanita, which is cool because it was likely, when you get into the science or the history behind it, it was very likely the original Eucharist, so like the cracker that one gets when they go to church, or very potentially at least. And yeah, it was a really, really beautiful experience. But I think that it'll start coming into play a lot more later in my life as I look to write books and stuff. But yeah, I want to be a writer, and then later a physicist.
It's interesting that you wanted to be like a creative writer, and then you went to a physicist, which is kind of almost, I would say, an opposite of that.
Yeah, best of both worlds,
Yeah. When I was younger, I was always creative. I mean, I'm still creative, but some of it's been beat out of me by like corporate life. But it's funny because I would love to have always in school like written for assignments instead of tests and stuff like that. And I just feel like it's such a difficult thing to be able to like do professionally. Like you've got to be really niche, really good, or really good and really niche. And it's a challenge, but now you're kind of like setting the stage to have the opportunity to do that. You're becoming an expert if you're not, you actually are an expert on, some pretty cool stuff, which we're going to talk about. But one of the things that I think is interesting, and I was saying beforehand, like I'm very, plant medicine, psychedelic, curious right now. And this show ends up almost being like a stream of thought for me of what's going on in my life and how do I talk to more people about it. And then, of course, get the word out. But you weren't always an advocate for plant medicine and healing. I'm curious if you'd be interested in sharing sort of how you stumbled upon Amanita specifically, which is a type of mushroom, which we can get into, but it wasn't just a hobby of yours. You kind of fell into it through a different route. Do you mind sharing your story?
Yeah, and I mean, it was in a sense like I was always really interested in plant medicines. I tried everything that I could get my hands on in my 20s, but that also included like hard drugs. So I was very active in
Mm.
addiction. I was an opiate addict, and I was addicted to benzodiazepines. I was also an entrepreneur, like I was in real estate, and I was very successful until I wasn't, right? Until it all kind of started falling apart. Um, and I had never tried Amanita though, and we'll get into that. But so I was getting off of at like late 20s, 28, 29. It was time to get off everything. Like life was kind of falling apart. I was a shell of the human that I used to be, and I decided to.
How did you start, if you don't mind me interrupting, I'm sorry. How did you discover opioids and benzos, which it's Xanax, right? Just to
Yeah.
clarify for layman. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So
Layperson.
benzos are typical anti-anxiety meds. You think, yeah, Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan, Valium. Those are all the heavy hitting benzos, and they're prescribed for anxiety, right? So like most people get introduced to them via doctors. Some people get introduced to them on the streets. Mine was originally doctors, and then as I continued it on the streets, I found opiates. I actually first started opiates in my teenage years, but I wasn't using them addictively. So I was kind of like, really into altering my brain chemistry, we'll say, throughout all of my teenage years, and I ended up in and out of treatments and stuff, and then was
Oh,
was
wow.
sober for a few years. Went to college, and then in college I started, discovering kind of the harder stuff. And yeah, I mean, it was, it, I had a tough, childhood, we'll say. I
Mm.
went through like a really intense depression that led to a psychosis that involved,
Oh,
cutting and suicide attempts and anorexia and the whole shebang, really.
jeez.
And and when I found substances, in some sense it saved my life. Like it really did in some sense. It was also a false light in another sense, But as like a 14-year-old kid who's like massively depressed, when you discover something that helps, like you cling on to it. Um, but yeah, so I started using heavier, more addictively in my 20s, and I was in school for physics, and then the '08 crisis happened, and I dropped out and got into real estate, which was great for a while, and yeah, like I said, eventually it kind of just all started falling apart. Like I was more and more, I was less and less of the person that I wanted to be, getting more and more addicted to substances and not able to uphold the work that I was doing or relationships, so on and so forth. And so at the end of my 20s, I decided to get off of everything, and I kicked opiates, which was, very difficult, but it was manageable. And then it was time to kick benzos, and
Mm.
I was on Klonopin for like 10, 12 years, and
Oh,
I had
wow.
heard time and time again that benzos were the hardest to kick, and I understood that, but I also kind of shrugged it off, and like I didn't, you know, I just I guess I didn't really think about it that much. But
Well,
when it
it's not
was
until you like can
time,
go through it where you can even understand it, I would imagine.
yeah, yeah, exactly, and yeah, and I really didn't understand it. And man, they are the hardest to kick. Like nothing comes close because it's it's essentially like living in a panic attack, for potentially years for many people. Like some people, I know people that have gotten off of them and they're 9 years off of them and they're still like really sick. And
Oh my
it's technically
gosh.
not withdrawal at that point; it's brain damage. So once healing a damaged GABA and glutamate system, and that can take a long, long, long time to do. Some people never recover from it. So I was, I like I said, it's like a panic attack times like 100. For I was in it for a year when I finally discovered the Amanita, and I was on a hike, and I was seriously contemplating ending my life. Like I was ready to pull the
Mm.
trigger, the proverbial trigger, and I was thinking about this as I was hiking around, and then I found this patch of mushrooms, and so Amanita muscaria is the typical toadstool mushroom that you see in Alice in Wonderland and Mario Brothers. The Smurfs live under them. It's the mushroom emoji on your phone. It's the most iconic mushroom in the world, and it well, until recent years, it wasn't spoken about really at all in like the psychoactive, psychedelic plant medicine community, because all the stories online were of people taking, really what we've learned now, very, very large doses and or not preparing them properly and having a really bad experience. So I like to akin it to like if you have a 16-year-old that's going to drink alcohol for the first time and they decide to like down a fifth of vodka, like that's not going to be the great experience. But nobody really knew like how to prepare them properly or like what dosing was meant to be. So I found this patch of mushrooms growing, and in Minnesota, they're the orange variety. They're called Kisoi, and so they were orange caps with white dots on them. And there was this just like unbelievable magnetism towards them. I like to akin it to when you meet somebody that's a future partner or a future really close friend. Like there's a pull towards that individual. Like I mean, pretty much everybody's experienced that, and I'd never felt that pull so potent at any point in my life prior to this. And in that there was also, I like to say the mushroom spoke to me. Some people, don't like that terminology, but what it really was there was this like deep, innate, intuitive knowing that like they had something to offer me, and that in return I was going to do something for them. And so, I was like, okay, and I picked them and I went to the house and I did some research, and I discovered through my research
when you picked them, if you don't mind me asking before the research, which I really want to get to, what? First of all, I personally believe we're all connected to nature and everything. So if something's speaking to you in nature, I totally believe that. And even if I didn't, you can say whatever you want on this show. So keep that in mind. And then second, at this moment when you were drawn to them, did you know that they had any psychedelic impacts, or were you just drawn to the way they look and the feeling you had, and you didn't even know what you were going to do with them when you picked them?
Yeah, no, I knew that. I didn't know the pharmacology. I didn't know what they did necessarily. I mean, I'd read some reports online, but again, this was all like nothing was positive online. So I was like scared of them, right? Because that was kind of the narrative that had been out there.
That's the stigma.
Yeah, but I didn't know that they hit the GABA system and the glutamate system, which is what I discovered when I was doing research. And so, which are the two systems that benzodiazepines damage. And the research suggested that they hit the GABA system in a way that's not addictive, which is really unique. Like GABAergic drugs are notoriously the most addicting in the world. It's the only neurotransmitter withdrawal that one can die off of. You think of alcohol withdrawal, benzo withdrawal, barbiturate withdrawal. Like people can die from seizures, which is why getting off benzos is also so tricky, because you have to taper over years generally. So not only are you in withdrawal for potentially years after you get off of them, you have to taper for years leading up to that. So you're in withdrawal that whole time as well. And through this
research, is crazy. I didn't know that. I knew they were like the hardest thing to get off of. I didn't realize it took that long.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reason. If it just lasted like a couple weeks, I would say opiate withdrawal is probably more difficult. But since it lasts for me personally, since it lasts for potentially years, like it's man. But yeah, so like there was one woman online who had just created her channel. Her name's Amanita Dreamer, if anybody wants to look her up. And she was telling the story about how it's the same story as me. She was on a hike. She was actually gun in hand on a hike, ready to kill herself. Suicide notes back at the house. Found a patch of mushrooms growing, Amanita growing. They spoke to her, and she picked them, went to the house, did research, found they hit the GABA and the glutamate system, and decided to try it out. And she told the story about how within, a certain amount of time, it was as if her brain rewired itself, and she started healing from this very, very rapidly, which, I was at my wit's end. I was willing to try just about anything right now, or at that point. And so I tried them, and it was like 2 weeks of microdosing with some low to medium doses peppered in there. And by the end of it, it felt to me like I was 70 to 80% healed, which was miraculous, because I was looking at like 5, 6, 7 more years of this at the rate that I was healing at that point. And it wasn't just while I was on them that I was better. It was when I stopped at the end of that 2 weeks, I was still better. So it was as if it rewired my brain. It rebalanced the GABA and the glutamate system. It gave homeostasis back to an unbalanced system. And so I like, it was miraculous, right? Like I could breathe again after drowning for years, it felt like.
And what did the research? Oh, go ahead.
No. Yeah, I was just gonna say. Then I reached out to this woman, Amanita Dreamer, and expressed my gratitude. And I had a cannabis company at this point in time, and I offered to sponsor a video of hers which we did, and her and I became friends. And there was this like growing, budding community around, generally mainly for people that were going through benzo withdrawal, finding this mushroom. But we've learned since then, it's so much more than just that as far as efficacy and application. And it was 6 months later that she asked me to start selling mushrooms because nobody was doing it here in the States, and people had to import it from Russia or Ukraine or wherever. So that was, how the business got started.
That's so cool. That's cool that you both sort of have a similar story too, to how it kind of drew you in and was speaking to you and making you feel like you had some sort of connection to it. When you were doing your first research, because I think like microdosing has kind of, and really in I maybe the last 2 or 3 years, microdosing a lot of things, but specifically like mushrooms and nootropics and all of these things to kind of like stimulate your brain, rewire your brain in some cases. It's really kind of become mainstream, where before it would be, oh, I'm going to go take a mushroom and have a like 6 to 8 hour trip essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you find in the research that helped you understand what you could do for those 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that was largely her because there wasn't much data out there about this. There was data, looking at the compounds in it. So we can get into the pharmacology of it in a little bit. But so looking at muscimol, for instance, and finding that it hits the GABA receptors, or abotenic acid hits the glutamate receptors. But there even to this day, there's really not much data on the mushroom itself. There's a small amount of data, but there's data on muscimol, abotenic acid, muscarine, some of the compounds in it. But nobody really studies the full mushroom itself, which is another thing that we can get into because we're looking to start funding research into this at some point in the near future, which is really important for acceptability on a public scale, particularly like professionals, doctors, they need data to really like look at using this as a potential option for their patients.
Why do you think there haven't been any studies as a whole?
Well, it's extremely expensive, which we're finding out, it's time consuming, and then there's no money in it. So like, the pharmaceutical companies, and then a lot of the time they keep their data, close to hand. They don't disseminate it amongst the public.
And it's a narrative.
Exactly.
You get a narrative of their data.
Well, and they're looking for something that they can then make an analog of so that they can patent it and then make money off of it. Like that's their intention.
Well, I mean, that's what they do. That's what they do with everything. They try to take it and see how can we tweak it just a little bit so we can patent it and then sell it. And they're trying to do that with marijuana. They're trying to do that with all sorts of different things. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And then it just like wasn't in the sphere of knowledge much, until recently. It really like the past couple years is it's really started to take off. And I mean, take off is subjective, right? Like it's still very, very. It's not very well known at this point, but and now we're starting to see some universities and stuff look at studying it, which is great. But yeah, it just wasn't something that people really studied.
Yeah, I find it's interesting because like I remember even 5 years ago, it seemed like there was such a stigma around anything plant-based and it kind of went away like for marijuana, but like anything like this was just so taboo, and people, you maybe talk about it with a friend or something, but it was just taboo. And now over the last few years, you've seen all of the potential benefits to varying mental health conditions and illnesses and just regular everyday challenges that you would think, considering we're in a mental health crisis in this country and pretty much the whole world, that these new plant-based treatments and protocols would be studied and would be readily available. But obviously we're not big fans of big pharma on this podcast, but listen to any of my other episodes, they probably get bashed at least once an episode at this point. But thank you for championing it. But like, how do you get some of this research done so that it can become more mainstream? We can get rid of stigmas from 15, 20 years ago, especially when there's no money in it, any big money.
Well, it's tricky, and a lot of it is just raising capital, and so the real, I mean, one needs to have a nonprofit. Like that's really that's really important so that people that, are donating money to research can get tax write-offs, because there's no return on investment for it. Like for us as a business, like there's a potential return on investment. So we crowdfund through our customer base. At checkout, there's an option to donate to our fund, and we put in a little bit of profits every month as well towards it. But that's going to take some time. I mean, we need like hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars to do this, and so we really need like large donors. So we're looking at, nonprofits and how to make it happen so that people that donate money can get tax write-offs for it. And then, the ROI is the benefit that comes to the world from it. And that's in the pitch that we have to have towards these potential investors, or potential grantors of funds for research. But yeah, it's a complicated aspect of all this, and we'll get it done at some point. But it's just, the sooner we can get it done, the better, and we need money to do that. But then also the time doing the research takes time as well. So it's still, even if we had $500,000 right now to put towards it, like it would be a 2-year ordeal very likely. So so yeah, it's going to take time, and it's a tricky issue. But
yeah, so it's, I mean, getting any kind of research is time consuming, costly. Like you said, the ROI for an investor is not always necessarily there. And then, by the way, if you funded all the research yourself, if you could, people would say there's a bias there, right? So you're kind of like in between a rock and a hard place. But I want to, so you obviously had this, game changing experience over your 2 weeks of microdosing Amanita. What is some of the science of the benefits to what conditions, like what can it help with, and what is some of the science behind that?
Yeah, so I mean, again, the actual data is looking at muscimol, ibotenic acid, the main compounds in it, and most of that is focused on muscimol. And muscimol is a GABA agonist, so it works in the brain similarly to something like Xanax or alcohol. It relaxes one, it lowers inhibitions, it can release stress. So a lot of the data suggests its use for things like depression or anxiety, or really mostly mental health. However, the anecdotal data that we've collected with our tens and tens of thousands of customers and reports, and then really hundreds of thousands throughout the world, is really vast. And it's, I mean, people are using it anywhere from mental health issues, and really any mental health issue under the sun that you can think of. There's somebody that's trying it for, and very likely somebody that's found great benefit for. And then there's various physical ailments too, things like fibromyalgia, various nerve pain conditions, Lyme disease. It's potentially very efficacious for Parkinson's. It's potentially very efficacious for. So there's this like really vast pool of anecdotes that we've gathered over the years that suggests like a really powerful healing effect. And then a lot of the issue, a lot of what we're finding too is that it seems to help people work with, just like psychedelics, right? Like, and technically Amanita is not psychedelic. We kind of lump it in that category in some instances. And then really like, it's almost like a bridge to that realm for a lot of people. So like they've never, been interested or delved into the psychedelic realm. And then they start utilizing Amanita and seeing the benefit that it has for them. And then they're more interested in psychedelics. So we find it's often a bridge.
That's interesting, because I think like I've done nootropics, right? So maybe that's kind of what got me interested in it, and functional mushrooms as well. That which I didn't even. I feel silly because like I feel like I know a lot more than the common person about like plant medicine and stuff like that, but I didn't know about functional mushrooms until maybe 3 years ago. And I learned about them at a street fest. I'm in Chicago. I learned about them at a street fest because someone was selling them, and I bought them, and it was lion's mane, all the regular ones in there. And so to me, like learning a little bit about this with you today, it is kind of my first time, and my curiosity is out there. And what I always wonder is, what is it like? What's that 2-week experience, or however long it is? Like, what is microdosing do? How do you feel? How does it impact your day to day? When did you start noticing benefits? Like things like that. Where people who are like, well, I've got to work, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I can't, sit there and be whatever with.
Yeah,
So
have an
what's
8-hour experience. Yeah.
exactly like an out of
Yeah.
body? Yeah.
Yeah, so for me it was an immediate like relief, immediate. And that was, I was in such like a state of panic that like any little, adjustment to that was really
Mm.
noticeable to me. And for a lot of people it's very immediate with microdosing. For a lot of people with microdosing, it's not very immediate, but things change over time. And like, what one and a lot of times it really has to do with uh how one views their thoughts and like and watches how they interact with their day-to-day
Mm-hmm.
life and the world around them. So like if one is very perceptive and like understands like how their thoughts flow, then they might notice it much more, much more strongly initially. But that with microdosing, it's tend to be taken for the effects that accrue over time, which is,
Yeah.
generally it tends to give people space, right? Like in between their thoughts and reactions. And then through the glutamate activity, it's very likely, we don't have data on this, but it's very likely that it's hard to deny that it's increasing neuroplasticity and increasing the
Oh
rate
yeah.
that neurons are firing and that synapses are connecting. Because like, within 2 weeks, like my systems were largely balanced. Like something's going on there, and so it gives, so like, let's say somebody has anger issues or whatever, they have anxiety, whatever it may be. They're in a situation where normally it would elicit a reaction. That reaction, they tend to have more space in between that reaction. And then there's also like this really gentle nudge towards like, reacting and acting in line with something that's more akin to like the person that you're trying to be, or your higher self, or however you want to put it. So they don't have that reaction.
So
It's
it like
also,
slows things down for people, it sounds like.
yeah, and it doesn't like make you slow, but yeah, in a sense, like it's slow. It gives you space, yeah. And then they don't get angry or they don't get anxious or whatever it may be. And if there is, increased neuroplasticity, which there very likely is, it's also forging those new neuronal networks that are allowing them to, next time something like that happens, to not get as angry. And then every time that happens, it's forging those new networks and new networks. So you can imagine, like with really any issue that we have with our thought processes, which translate to physical reactions or whatever,
Yeah.
like any issue, if you're able to like choose the higher option and forge new neuronal networks to choose that in the future, like you can imagine the transformation that people go through.
That's the
And this is,
neuroplasticity there, like the
yep,
rewiring your brain, making it,
yep.
work better for you. Yeah, that's
Yep,
great.
exactly. And then it's with the GABAergic activity, it's calming. It reduces stress. It reduces the hit of that anxiety or the hit of that stress or the hit of that anger or whatever it may be. Which and then it forges new neural networks to support that and reinforce that time and time again. So like, a lot of times with psilocybin, for instance, which is our typical magic mushrooms that people think of, it can elicit anxiety in people. While there might be a
Mm-hmm.
lot of other benefits, people can also get really anxious. Where Amanita does the opposite. It's really one of the most efficacious anti-anxiety substances on the face of this earth. But then, unlike a lot of the other, herbs and stuff that hit GABA, it also has the glutamate activity, which seems to forge these new neuronal networks. So, and then on top of that too, we work with a lot of like executives or business owners utilize Amanita because it has really potent nootropic qualities to it as well. So we have muscarine in it, which works in the acetylcholine system, which is what like all the smart drugs and nootropics hit. So there people notice like increase in attention span, increase in memory recall, increase in verbal
God, we
fluency,
all need
things of
that.
that nature. Yeah, yep. And then because it's reinforcing the neuronal networks, like that seems to last as well. So like, yeah, the potential benefit is really really vast. And generally like the worst thing that we hear from people is like, I didn't feel it, I didn't notice anything. And if that's the case, it's nine out of 10 times they just need to try a little bit of a larger dose.
So that's what I was going to ask about dosing. So just to put a bow on that, you're basically saying this gives you, it's almost like nature's anti-anxiety medicine. You can still function, you can still do your job, you can still, I think I heard you say you're not supposed to drive on it, or is that a specific dose?
It depends on dosing. Yeah, like
Okay.
pretty much everybody's fine to drive at microdosing. You know, I mean, when you're trying any substance for the first time, it's probably
Of
good to like
course.
try it at night when you're at home for the first time. You know, but like, yeah, I would say probably 99 out of 100 people are going to be very comfortable driving on these microdose levels. And then, you know, once we get into like, so we'll give like a quick dosing table. So microdosing is
Yes.
generally like a half gram to a gram. That's generally what a microdose is for most people. Um, a low dose, which is where you start noticing more pronounced relaxation, more, you know, increase in sociability, more mood lift, things of that nature. That's generally like 2 grams to 5 grams, give or take. And most people are okay to drive on that level too. Again, make sure that you are before, you know,
Yeah.
driving operating machinery. But and then and we get into larger doses like medium doses would be like 5 to 10 grams. Strong would be like 10 to 15. Heroic would be like 15 plus, and that's nobody should be driving on that level. Most people should not be utilizing Amanita at that level. Most people are not going to like it. A very select few people are really going to love it. I personally, I've been able to get the most work done on myself, you know, and I utilize all plant medicines, like, and I'm able to get the most work done on Amanita, like above and beyond anything, like by a lot for me personally, for my own physiology.
Mm.
Um, but yeah,
What
not
dose
everybody likes it.
do you microdose it regularly, or do you do it in what what I'm blanking on the word. When you do it, then you stop, then you do it, then you stop.
Yeah, cycle it. I don't
Cycle it.
microdose that
That's it.
often. Yeah, I don't microdose that often anymore. I used to a lot. It's become, and sometimes it's advantageous for me. Sometimes before podcasts, I like taking, you know, a couple grams. I didn't today, but and that would be more of like a low dose level. But yeah, I don't use it that often these days at those levels. I'll use it for sleep every now and then because it's really great as a sleep aid. Like it's phenomenal for sleep. That's probably a lot of people, maybe like half the people that get into it are initially getting into it because of sleep, and then they'll realize all the other benefits that start to come from
Mm.
it. But yeah, these days I'll do the heroic doses maybe like once every couple months, and then I might take it for sleep once or twice a month, and then I'll do microdoses or low doses, yeah, maybe a couple times a month. But I used to do it daily, you know, for a year I did it daily. I did that 2 weeks, and then I took 2 weeks off, and then after that I started doing it very regularly for about a year. And I'll go
Mm.
in cycles where every now and then, you know, maybe every 6 months or so, it'll be like, I think I do a microdose regimen of it, you know, and I'll do 2 weeks or a month, and then I'll stop and I won't go back to it for a while. Yeah.
And you still get new benefits, or do you feel like some of your symptoms, for lack of a better word, start to bubble back up, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to microdose again, or do you just keep making further
For,
advancements in your
for
cognitives?
me, for me, it's been more further advancements. Yeah, personally. Yep.
Mm, that's cool. And when you do a heroic dose, what's that like for you? I know you said it's different for people, and a lot of people can't do it, but what does it do for you,
It
and how's it
so it
feel?
puts yeah, it's hard to explain. It's hard to put in words. It puts one in like a very heavy dreamlike state. There is it so I've always used psychedelic and substances because of the way they alter my thought processes, and like Amanita alters it in a very very specific way that nothing else does. No other substance alters it like it, and I'm able to view issues in a really like in a very specific way. And so like I
Mm,
use it for work, right? So like if I am like getting stressed out in my life, or if there's like something that I notice about myself that I want to fix, or like, you know, I went through a really nasty breakup a couple of years ago, like things like that, like I'll use it for work. Like I'll go in and it seems to like very strongly blunt my reactions to things. So I'm
mm.
able to like look at issues or traumas or whatever it may be without having
More
it hurt
objectively,
more
yeah,
objectively. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yep. And I'll be able to like really work through things in a really beautiful way. It also seems to like connect me. I like to say that nothing connects me to God like Amanita does. Not like ayahuasca or whatever, you know, other psychedelics. They connect us to God or to the universe or to like other dimensions or whatever it may be. Like Amanita connects me to like my highest self, my highest,
Mm.
best, true self. And I'm able to bring that individual forward more and more. the more that I work with it. And I think that that's relatively consistent amongst people that are utilizing it. However, it's uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable experience in these really high doses. Most people get involuntary muscle twitching. So like, and people can freak out by it because like their body's twitching and they think it's like a bad reaction when it's not. It's just like how it works. But I actually think that I think that the twitching is releasing blocked emotions and trauma that are stuck in the body. That's what I personally believe. But that
Well,
can
and
be
I mean
alarming for
that's
people.
like that's something that is true. Like you store your trauma, your stress
For
all
sure.
throughout your body. Yeah,
Of course.
there's emerging research there showing that from psychologists and neuroscientists and everything that your traumas all store in your body, and they can even maybe manifest into cancers and other things. So yeah, releasing those is good for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and that's knowledge that's been known for thousands of years in these other circles, and it's kind of fun that more recently we're seeing all this information that's been in the minds of these shamans or yogis or healers or whatever for thousands of years, and we're finally getting data into it. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be delirious in high doses where people can get confused, and so most people a lot of people really should have like somebody sitting with them if they're going to do a really
Yeah.
high dose, at least for the first couple times. But yeah, again, most people aren't going to like it, and I don't recommend it for most people. However, pretty much everybody tends to enjoy. Again, like I said, like the worst thing generally that we hear is like I didn't feel anything. So
Yeah.
pretty much everybody enjoys the low to medium dose range, and then microdosing as well. Yeah, because it just like relaxes one and opens one up and makes people feel really grounded and like in a flow state, so they're able to operate through their day to day without getting caught up in the head, which is like a really great benefit for just about everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, everyone right now is so overstimulated, cognitively overloaded. I think that's kind of what like makes me want to explore stuff like this and plant-based medicines and nootropics and even psychedelics and different treatments like we had. I mentioned earlier. We talked about ketamine with a doctor and ketamine treatment for depression and anxiety. And I think the reason is that like from my perspective, like I can see myself, and I think a lot of people can see like the changes that have happened from like the person that I used to be before there was a million notifications, before the stressful jobs and the stressful life events and the chaos of the world that we live in right now. And it's just you're constantly bombarded with more and more information. And I have a good therapist, and I work through a lot of it, but it's almost like there needs to be something more. And that's where I'm trying to figure out, like, well, what is that something more that's going to help me sort of um you know exhale in the middle of the day when it's been back to back meetings, and I've got 100 things on my to-do list, and then I've got a relationship, and I've got it's Thanksgiving. We're filming this right around Thanksgiving, so it's like going home to see family is always a stressful one for me. So it's like just looking for that like extra thing that kind of like works with your brain to counteract all of the shit that we're constantly getting put into our minds these days,
Yep.
along with the stresses of regular everyday life.
Yeah.
So my,
Yep.
my
Yeah.
point, I forgot why I started that rant. Now I remember. So my point on asking that is like someone like me or a regular person who's like, I'm just trying to get a hold of my thoughts, maybe not have anxiety. What would you recommend them to start with? And then, but maybe we can go through like one or two other use cases that I'm curious about.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people are going to notice the most benefit if they're watching their thoughts. Like, and that's consistent with just about anything. And like, any teacher and any spiritual practice, they're always going to say like, you gotta be focused on what
Yeah.
your thoughts are producing in your body and in your field. So like, I think that if anybody's looking to get into this, something like journaling is a really great exercise.
Yeah.
Really, just like being conscious and conscientious of like how you're thinking throughout the day is really, really important. And it's a tough exercise to get
Mm-hmm.
proficient in and good at. But for anybody interested in starting with this, like you're gonna get the most benefit if you can start watching your thoughts like as you get into it or prior to getting into it. A good, and before I get into recommendations, a good anecdote on this is in the early days, I was hosting these monthly Zoom meetings for people that were, getting into microdosing and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And they were people would generally do like month-long protocols. So I had a woman come in and she was 2 weeks into her first month protocol, and she comes in and she's like, Christian, I don't quite get it. Like, I feel like something's different, but I can't put my finger on it. I'm not sure if they're doing anything, but if something feels a little different. And I gave her some pointers, but really it was like, watch your thoughts, like pay attention to your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, start journaling, like see where your thoughts are differing from where they were, prior. And the month goes on, and the next meeting, she did a month protocol. She was 2 weeks in initially, so she's 2 weeks off of her protocol at this point, and she's just beaming. And she comes in, and she's like, I figured it out. Um, that that voice in my head, that self-deprecating voice, that voice that talks down to me, it's been
Mm-hmm.
largely gone since I started microdosing, and since I stopped
Wow.
since I stopped. However, I didn't realize it because I wasn't paying attention to my thoughts, and oftentimes like the body and the field and the environment like lag from the thoughts changing. So it takes a little bit of time to catch up. So she didn't really start noticing and feeling the benefits until a little bit later. But that voice in her head like became much more positive, and like what a cool benefit.
Yeah.
So
That
I
inner
would say
that inner critic can be a real asshole.
for real, dude. Yeah, for real. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So I think most people starting with microdosing is great. Oftentimes it's good to start with a low dose just to see what it does in the body. Then they'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to understand what microdosing is doing a little bit better. So low dose would be something like 2 to 3 grams, which would be, like 4 to 6 of the capsules or gummies or whatever, just to like get a feel for it. And
Yeah.
9 out of 10 people are going to be okay to drive on that dose, but still try it in the evening. And then from there, microdosing is one capsule, one gummy, one unit, one dropper of the tincture, whatever it may be. And most people will do it 2 to 3 times a day for a month, or for 2 months, or for 2 weeks, whatever it may be. And that's a really great way to like get inundated into the experience and see like kind of what will come of
Mm.
it. And then after that, a lot of people start to want to experiment with larger doses where they'll try 5 grams, brewed up in a tea. A lot of people will end up finding like what really works for them, and it'll be, 3 grams twice a day, on days that they want it or whatever. And it's so dependent on each person. It's hard to give like
Yeah.
a set,
It's
dosing
actually
schedule for anybody. But
which I appreciate you saying that more than saying here's what you do, because I feel like that's part of the problem with like pharmaceuticals too. But you have to like listen to your body. You have to pay attention. You have to journal. And one of the things I actually wrote a guided journal a couple years ago, and one of the things that people gave really good feedback on was where I had them assess how they felt about things. I added another section that was like why, to really help people like think about, okay, so I have this thought. Why do I have this thought? Not that I
yeah,
have this thought, because step one is I have this thought. A lot of people don't have the thought that they have the thought. Then the next step I found is like when you ask the why you have that thought, that's where the real work starts, right? It's not
yeah,
the recognizing you have issues, it's the why do you feel that way. And a lot of times you find out real quickly there's no rational reason that
mm,
you're thinking or feeling that way, and that's that inner critic asshole.
yeah,
And then I think too, like what a lot of people seem to struggle with, and I have too in times where it's like, I had some stints on antidepressants. I had, a lot of depressive issues in, especially in my 20s, I would say. And, I tried a bunch of different antidepressants, and it was such a trial and error that I remember feeling at one point, I'm like, I don't even think I'm in control of my own
yeah,
health anymore. Like it's just like add this, do this, try this, do it every other day. It's like what? Like, and I think it's up to us as people to be responsible for our health. Whether you're talking to someone like you who's an expert here, or your doctor about a pharmaceutical, you've got to assess your own body, because what's good for one may not be good for you. What's good for 99 may not be good for the one. And so
right,
I appreciate you saying that, because I think a lot of times people just want the direction, which is good, but the direction it sounds like you're giving is like start small, pay attention, journal if you can, get your thoughts around it, increase if you're not feeling anything,
yeah,
experiment if you are feeling good benefits. And I think that's it's not as prescriptive, but that's the way to do it to get the best benefit for you as an individual person.
Yeah, yeah. When it puts us in charge of our health and our life, right? Like we're not giving our power away to something else. And I mean, the body will always tell us what it needs and what it wants. We just
Yes.
have to quiet ourselves enough to listen and to learn how to listen properly without putting the ego in there and being like, "Well, I want this." It's like, well, the body may not want that, you know. So it's tricky, but and it's also like a great lesson and crash course in spirituality, honestly, like and
Mm-hmm.
becoming more in tune with everything. Like if we can get in tune with our body, we can get in tune with the people around us more. We can get in tune with our work life or whatever it may be. So it's like it's an important aspect in like becoming a whole individual again. And I
Mm.
think and again in some sense like Amanita, like I said earlier, like it seems to be a bridge into the psychedelic realms. It also seems to be a bridge into spirituality for a lot of people and
Mm.
into evolution of consciousness and the individuals that we can truly become the best versions of
Yeah.
ourselves. And yeah,
Well, I always say, and I kind of, I've always felt this way, but a few years ago, I was going through some very rough times, and I almost got like beat into submission where I felt like the only thing I could do, to get out of my dark feelings and suicidal ideation and thoughts of like, what am I doing here? I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm tired, and I just remember I'm like, you know what? If I don't start like listening to the universe and actually hearing the universe, like I'm just going to be trapped in this, hellscape of negativity and poor thoughts and letting the world, I've said this before on here, but like I felt like the world was just happening to me and I wasn't an active participant in it. And so
yeah,
like to get out of that mindset, I was just like, I've got to just listen more to what's going on. And like it led me to start taking more walks. It led me to spending a lot more time outside. I'm in the city, so there's not a lot of nature, but there's enough parks that I visit them every single day, no matter what. I have a
yeah,
dog that helps, but like just being able to like be outside, be in the sun, listen to the wind blow. I haven't had any, beautiful red, orange, and white mushrooms talking to me, but I would love to get to that point someday because I believe that if you listen to the universe, it's always talking to you. It's always
yeah,
communicating with you. And you're communicating with it. It's like what you put out in the world, you get back from the world. And if we could just get in touch with the bigger picture of how everything's connected and we're all part of this ecosystem that's like so unlikely to ever have happened the way that it did,
yeah,
it can just kind of like change perspective. And that's what it did for me. It made me realize like, I don't want to say don't sweat the small stuff, but kind of like it is what it is. Right. And I say that as a joke with my friends hate when I say that, but it's like, it is what it is. Control what you can control. You got to let go of the other stuff. Otherwise, the world's going to work you if you're not working it. And so
yep,
I feel like something like this if it can bridge people to feel a little more connected to nature and the universe and a little less glued to a computer, social media, influencers, celebrities, their jobs. And I'm not saying don't be dialed into your job, but you know what I mean? It's like that is just such a small piece in the world. And by the way, a lot of that stuff is like man-made constructs. And
mm-hmm.
if you can just open your mind, whether that be through meditation, whether that be through anything, right? All the stuff we're talking about here, like that's the way to go. That's how you find peace.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think also like the universe and it speaks to you louder, or at least you're much more receptive to it the more in tune you are with your body. So it's like again, it's the bridge into that realm, and then things like synchronicity can start to increase
Mm.
in really profound fashions, and like it's another aspect, and I don't think that it's the mushroom that's doing that for people. I mean, maybe in some sense, but I think that
I think it's the
that
Matrix. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah. Well, they're sure. It's that they're connecting to a higher aspect of themselves. So then things like synchronicity increase to a really profound degree, or
Mhm.
things like intuitive downloads, where like you're getting a phone call and you're like, oh, that's John, and you look and you're like, yeah, it's John.
Oh my
Things
god!
of that nature. We start seeing things like that increase really profound. We did a poll a while ago, and I think it was like 70% of people that are taking Amanita that responded to the poll saw a profound increase in synchronicity as they got
Wow.
into this realm. And so, like, what's causing that, I'm not entirely sure, but it's got to largely be the fact that these people are more in tune. When you're more in tune, things speak a little bit louder
Yeah.
to you, and crazy things start happening that like line up. Like my life is like a movie at this point, like things just line up that are like,
Yeah.
progressing me to the further and further levels. And it wouldn't happen if I hadn't put in all that work, and I wouldn't have been able to put in as much work as I have without utilizing this mushroom.
Yeah. I think one thing I've noticed in the last few years, since I kind of was just like, Jesus, take the wheel. Like,
Yeah.
since I kind of like was like, okay, I'm going to start paying attention more to what is around me and what's telling me, or what the universe is telling me. When I realized that too, a lot of things started just kind of either falling in place, or there was random things that happened that led me to meeting people that I maybe would have never met otherwise. And it's because I was paying attention and I was listening. And even,
Yep.
the most recent example I have, because I have that intuitive feeling that you were mentioning, like I can sometimes be like, oh my God, so and so is going to call me, and then they call me, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I remember
Yep.
like a little over a year ago, I have a hip injury, so I had like a stem cell procedure done, from a doctor I actually had on this podcast, to talk about it. And I literally it was out in Las Vegas. I got this procedure done and I was fine. And then I got back to the hotel and the local numbing agent had worn off, and I felt like my leg was going to fall off and I could barely walk. And I'm like, I was out there alone. And I was literally, I remember like, my boss texted me and she's like, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm like in a lot of pain and it sucks. She's like, well, don't you have anyone there with you? And I said, no. She's like, oh my gosh, that's so sad. And I was like, that is sad. And I hadn't dated in a long time at that point. After a rough divorce and breakup and divorce. And I remember I was like, that night I changed my mindset and I was like, you know what? I'm going to open myself up so that I can meet people, to,
Yeah.
date. And then literally like 3 days later, I met a girl that I've been dating for a year now. And
Yeah.
it's like, it was literally like 3 days later. It was literally 3 days later. And I remember I made up my mind. I was like, I'm not going to do this alone thing for the rest of my life. And then I just changed my mindset. I opened up and the world was like, here's this person who, by the way, I had met before through a mutual friend and didn't even click on my radar. So I have these kinds of experiences that when I do kind of put my mind in the right place, that like the intuition takes over, the universe starts talking to me, it introduces me things, it moves things start falling into place. And I think, I'm not consistent like that because I let things get to my head, I let things get in the way. And so anyway, long story short, I do believe that. And I think that if people can find tools to help them open up their mind and just shut the inner critic up, take a deep breath, let the exhale go fully through, and get a little microdose to support it, I highly recommend people take that opportunity. Now, especially here, unless you have anything to add there, I had another thing I wanted to get your
No, go
thoughts
ahead.
on. Okay. So we're kind of in this position from a legality perspective, right? We're in a position now where like more and more plant-based treatments are being explored and accepted in different ways, right? Like I remember Aaron Rodgers talked about his ayahuasca thing, and like half of the world's hair went on fire and the other half was like, this is so cool that we're like talking about it this way. So there's a stigma, which we've kind of talked about, but like what's the legal aspect of all of this from your perspective? And I know you have Amanita as a main thing that you are supporting here, but like, is it legal? And what are some of the implications of legality of Amanita and psychedelics?
Yeah, so fortunately, Amanita is 100% legal in all states except for Louisiana, which is really too bad, but it is what it is. They made a
Hmm.
sweeping psychoactive plant ban in the early 2000s, and they banned a ton of stuff that everywhere else
Oh
is
wow.
100% legal. But yeah, it's legal, so people can it's navigatable by anybody, professionals. We work with a lot of, doctors, functional medicine doctors, or therapists, or whomever that utilize Amanita because they can, they're allowed to, which is really, really important. Because yeah, psychedelics are not legal in most areas. I mean, psilocybin's legality is popping up in various cities and states, but I very much hope and 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 we're doing as much as we can to help push this, is that psychedelics can become more readily available for people, because the benefit are it's pretty obvious to just about everybody at this point what the potential benefit is for. Like you said, there's still pushback from a lot of people, but that's generally, like, the newer generations are much more apt to looking at utilizing these, and I would very much hope that we'll see that become legal more and more. And again, I think in some sense, again, Amanita is the bridge to that, which we see play out time and time again. And hopefully, and there's always the risk and the concern that it could be banned and become controlled at some point. But we have a pretty large growing community of potential advocates in case something like that does start to crop up, which we've very diligently prepared for, just in case, because we can get a pretty loud outrage against that if it does happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, 100% legal. All the products that we sell are 100% legal. If psilocybin was legal, we'd sell that too for sure, because I have my own experiences with that, and I know the potential benefits for everybody. But yeah, we just work with what's legal. But Amanita is 100% legal.
And you had your company Amantara, you've kind of said already, like, but what is your vision for your company and what you're hoping to bring out into the world? And I mean, you're such a strong advocate for it as well. So I want to give you a chance to advocate for your brand and your business and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Research is really important, so we're hoping to get research done within the next, hopefully funded within the next year, and actually, completed, or starting to get data out there within the next couple of years. I do, speaking engagements all around the country. I do podcasts, so education is a really important aspect of all this. I mean, and then once somebody really, it's almost as if like a switch gets flipped in people when they really start getting Amanita, and people become really strong advocates. So like one person that gets like lit up is gonna light up 10 other people. So we've seen like tremendous organic growth with this, and like I don't foresee that slowing down at any point. In fact, I think it'll probably just pick up and pick up. But we're working to get this. I would like for this to be a known, viable option for every person in the world, and at least America. And so like that's kind of the goal, and whatever avenues we have to take to get there, we're looking at doing. And then there's also and this is on the more practical aspect of the business, but there's also a spiritual component to this that's really, really important to me and to the team, and to the customers and consumers and the family, I guess, that we've built up. And that's things like ceremony, or helping train coaches to bring people through Amanita microdosing, or bring people through hard times in their life, or whatever it may be. I mean, kind of building up this network of individuals that can bring people through healing, and then bring people through spiritual evolution as well, which is kind of, as we've started to move into we're kind of branching out into that direction as well.
Yeah.
And it's recent, but I hope that in the next couple of years, we'll start seeing a lot more of that, and start seeing, coaches all around the world and around the country, and ceremonies happening all around the world and all around the country. Because I mean, my whole intention with all this is to have the largest possible positive impact on the world that I can.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm here to do. Like that's what I want to do. So any avenue that we can, impact people's lives further, like we're going to look at doing. And we've already seen, 10,000 people get off benzos. We've seen tens and tens of thousands of people like completely transform their life. And so it's a beautiful, it's an honor and a privilege and a blessing. It's just a start in some sense. And like the goal is to help as many people as possible. So.
Well, I think that's an admirable goal, and I hope, and I have all the faith in the world that you keep that as you grow your business, grow your voice, and continue helping people. Because I think I would say don't sleep on the therapist community, because I have a lot of therapists in my network. I also have my own therapist. I have a lot of friends, and so many seem to be sort of trying to branch out and recognize some of the stuff we've talked about today, but like recognize that, like, maybe the traditional methods of medication are dated, and maybe
Yeah.
there is ways that we can help. I know a lot, they got to do continuing education, right? So there's questions around, like, how can we manage depression and anxiety and help regulate a nervous system, that goes beyond talk therapy. And so I think, like, this integrated approach, and I think neuroscience, mental health, this type of natural medication, nature's medicine, all of these things are at the point now where there's enough information that they're kind of starting to intertwine and
Yeah.
recognize that each can play a role in the wellness of an individual. And so I think there's like a huge opportunity there and it's all education, right? You're like, you're
Yep.
constantly going to be in the educational phase with this, because of the stigma, because of, the money that's put into advertising pharmaceuticals and everything like that. So I think, yeah, there's just a huge opportunity, with plant medicine as a whole, but with what you're doing to really help people in the mental health community, in the coaching space, get an extra tool in their toolbox, because they're always
Yep.
looking for that and always looking for a way to help a client get clarity. Because sometimes, like, the reality is talk therapy is just not enough. It's just not going to be enough. And it's a tool, but it's not going to be, the only tool. So I
Yeah.
think there's huge opportunity there for you too, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I agree. Absolutely.
All right, before we wrap up, I'm going to give you a chance to ask me anything, and then we'll wrap up and we can tell people how to get in touch with you.
What's your spiritual journey been like? I'm super. This is like,
Oh my gosh.
this is what makes me tick, and
Yeah.
like everything like it's all a bridge to this for me. So yeah, I'm curious.
Uh, we might be recording part 2 because it's long,
Sounds
but
good. Yeah. Yeah. Quick
I'll give you the
synopsis.
cliff notes. Yeah, I'll give you the cliff notes. Chat GPT TLDR this story.
Sure.
So I grew up Catholic, pretty Catholic. I went to a Catholic school. My uncle was a priest. My grandparents and parents raised us Catholic. We went to church every Sunday, Catholic school till high school. Um, Lots of trust God, right? Don't sin, all the bad things, all the shame, all of that stuff. And as I got into high school, and my world, I always say, was like opened up, because I was in a class of like 18 people that I was with from second grade all the way to eighth grade, and there wasn't much change in it, and the world was very small to me at that point. When I went to a public high school, um, because we were, working class, and there was, just, you got to go to a public school, and we had some of those struggles growing up. The world opened up to me, and I was like, this actually doesn't make as much sense as it did when I was kind of in my own contained Catholic school world.
Yeah.
And as time went on, I started, in a nutshell, I started questioning more things, learning about more things. I didn't know what real anxiety or depression were until high school, and then I realized, like, oh my God, I think I've been depressed since I was like 5. And so I just kind of had this like world that just kept opening more and more. And then I just kind of went and became agnostic. And I'm like, I don't want to go to church anymore. I don't really want to be a practicing Catholic. Um, and then as time went on, and I just started kind of having my life, like, organized religion and thoughts like that. And I tried other churches too, by the way. More modern churches, less organized religion, more just Christian, and nothing really seemed to resonate with me until I started thinking more about the world and how everything is timing, and how I'm here at this unique moment in this unique time over billions and billions and trillions and infinite amount of times. And I don't know that it makes sense to me that there's just this world of people, and God made us and put us here. And then he said, let there be light. And then, he told Adam and Eve not to eat the apple from the tree. And it's just like, it all just kind of started making me think that everything was much bigger than I ever thought it was going to be. And if everything was so big, and there was space, and there were galaxies and all this stuff, that like there was just something much bigger than me. And then, I started kind of getting, like I said, more into nature, and paying attention to what's happening around me. and getting out of the grind of the day to day, which is just putting you from one piece of bullshit to the next, and that it's all man made, it's all constructed. And so that was really, I haven't like believed in like a God, and then I was a little agnostic. And then I don't know if I was ever atheist, but I was definitely like, there's no bearded old man in the sky
For sure.
making how things go. So I definitely got to that point. And then it's just really like the last probably 5 years or so, I've just been like, I think we're all connected. I think I'm connected to everything in this universe in one way or another. I'm curious about like reincarnation. I'm curious about the spirit. I don't think that I die and that's it. I think that I've probably lived other lives and lived other experiences. And so I just kind of, I'm just open to all of it. And I'm just kind of in this place where like, I think we're all connected to each other. And I think we're all connected to the universe. And, if we can just kind of lean into that more, the rest of it just doesn't matter as much. So that's kind of, I'm kind of in the middle of it, I guess, would be the
Yeah.
short answer.
Yeah, I love that. Can I make a book recommendation?
Yeah, please do.
There's a book called, I'll tell a quick story. I know we're running out of time, but
No, we're fine.
when I was 19, I moved to Portland, and it's funny how I ended up moving to Portland. I wanted to leave Minnesota, and I had a friend who moved to Colorado, and I hit him up, and I was like, dude, I need to leave Minnesota. He's like, I want to leave Colorado. So we each took out a map of the U.S., and this was the plan.
Mm.
And we're going to flip a coin onto the map, and the midpoint between the two coins was where we are going to move to. And both of our coins ended up landing on Portland, Oregon, of course. Mm-hmm. So we ended up moving to Portland, and in Portland, I met this guy named Bobby the second day that I was there, and we met Bobby at a punk show, and he like came up to us and started talking, and later he was like, I never come up to anybody and start talking to them, like, but something just like compelled me to come up to you guys and start talking. And another weird sync lining it all up, and we started playing music with Bobby, and Bobby's dad was a paranoid schizophrenic, like the worst I've ever known in my life, and he would be gone and living on the streets for weeks at a time, and he'd come back and be at the house, and I never spoke with him once. He was always talking to people that weren't there, and about 6 months into this, we're all playing music in the basement, and Bobby's dad came back, and he comes downstairs, and his hair is in an unkept frenzy, his eyes are wide, and he has this book in his hand, and he walks right up to me, and he hands me the book, and he says, they told me you need to have this. And then he turned around and left the house, and I never saw him again. And the book was The Holographic Universe, and I didn't read it for like, by Michael Talbot.
Yeah.
We actually sell it on the website because it had such a profound impact on my life. And there's a ton of books that I want to start selling. There's a couple that we sell right now, but that was the first that I started selling. But I ended up reading it 6 months later, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. And it's not as much spiritual as it's the best book that I've ever read that puts physics in layman's terms to the spiritual, aspect of reality and like miraculous events that occur throughout history, things of that nature. But it's extremely profound. And yeah, I recommend it to anybody that's like interested in this topic, but it'll open up a whole new realm. Honestly, it'll create more questions than it does answers, but it'll answer a lot. But then it'll create, an infinite amount of questions on that. But yeah, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot would be potentially a really wonderful segue into some more fun stuff for you.
Yeah, I will check that out. And I've heard of that. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember who recommended that, but someone recommended that to me before. And I think that's kind of the nice thing about it, right? Is like you can answer some questions and then get deeper. And that's, if this book does that to me, it lights me up to talk to people about things that are interesting to me, but it also lights me up to speculate about the things that are so much greater than our regular consciousness can understand.
Yeah,
it's just,
for sure.
Yeah. So. Well, this has been a blast. I'm going to have to check. I'm going to have to check the book out. I think you may have me ready to check out Amanita as well, because it's less scary than any of the other stuff that and again, I don't even know why I'm scared of it anymore. I've had some good exploration, but I think you've convinced me to give it a shot. So yeah, thank you for that. Where can people get in touch with you on social media and online and all the digital channels?
Yeah. So the website is amantara.com, AMENTARA.com. We're on, Instagram, Facebook, all the things. So if you just search Amantara, you'll find us. We have our YouTube channel, same deal, Amantara. We have the Amanita Effect podcast on YouTube as well. I'm on Instagram personally. I don't really use it often, but people can find me on there, which is I think it's r.christian.r. Yeah, I mean, we're available. If anybody has questions, they can reach out. We're super responsive. We have a great team,
Excellent.
great staff that's very knowledgeable. So we're happy to help guide anybody through the process. And yeah, come check it out.
I love to hear that. All of those links will be down in the show notes too, so people can just click through and get in touch with you that way. Again, thanks again for your work. Thanks again for your advocacy. And most importantly, thanks for coming on the show and helping us break it down. So thank you again.
Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you for opening the platform to me. I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.